Hello and welcome to Nintendo Nightly, your Monday through Friday source for everything Nintendo. My name is Michael Catrella, your host, and today on the show, I want to talk about a game called OwlBoy. So OwlBoy is an indie game that is 10 years in the making, and while it didn't come first to Switch, it's here on Switch today in digital form and will later get a physical release. So OwlBoy is a platformer that has a main character with the ability to fly. While that may sound horrendously boring, the emphasis is instead placed on combat, puzzle solving, and navigating tight corridors as you move through the levels inside of the game. The visuals and the sprite work are absolutely gorgeous, and the world building is really well done. I genuinely want to know more about how this strange world works and the environments that they create, like the floating islands, all the different characters that are very much inspired, I think, by Zelda the Wind Waker, and there's a little story that's formed with it, and it all seems very, very, very interesting and cool. So they introduce you to the main character, Otis. He is the OwlBoy, and they do the whole like Nintendo mute protagonist thing, but they actually do it for a reason. It's a large part of his character, a large part of the prejudice and just shame that he receives on a daily basis for being the way that he is, and he has a ton of weight and responsibility that is thrown on them, and you really feel for him. So I think he's a really well-designed character. The way that he has a huge grin and sort of emotes without saying any words is really nice to see, very Nintendo-esque, but it's not mute for the sake of being mute. It's mute for a good reason. And I realize that Nintendo does this because they want you to feel like you're the protagonist, but let's be honest, like most people at this point playing Zelda, they just select the character's name as Link. They don't call him whatever your name is. That aside, the other characters are very charming as well. The father figure that you have there is kind of a nice switch up. You know, it's someone that is an ally and sort of an adversary at the same time. You feel the tension in their relationship, and Otis's best friend, Getty, is a really lovable character, and carrying him acts as the game's shooting mechanic. So with Otis, you've got certain tools that you've got at your disposal. You jump and fly around, you can roll, you can spin, a couple things that you could do there, but when the game introduces you to Getty, that's how you can actually aim and shoot. So aiming is done with the right analog stick, and shooting is done with the R trigger, so the shooting feels good, and you'll be able to weave around in the air with Otis while shooting with Getty. And of course, you're going to use their different abilities to solve different puzzles and beat different enemies, and the way that you need to kind of flip-flop between using one character and both of them is interesting. You know, if you spin in the air with OwlBoy, Getty will be thrown off of you, and you'll have to go back and pick him up. So in certain battles where you have to use both the spin attack and shooting mechanic, it could be an interesting little switch-up, though the game very early on gives the ability to sort of instantly summon them to your grasp. So we'll see if that continues to be an interesting tension or if it's just a funny control thing. So the game is retro in a charming way. Like I said, the sprite work is absolutely beautiful, something that probably couldn't have been accomplished on the Super Nintendo that it's sort of basing itself in, and it gives these obvious nods to Zelda: Link to the Past with the way that the text scrolling sounds and certain elements like that, but it makes sure to forge its own path as well. It's not indie for the sake of, indie Super Nintendo inspired Metroidvania blah 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 for the sake of selling copies. It's just, it is what it is. And the one weird thing is that I wish I was able to play this with someone else, even if there was the only degree of control that they got was aiming and shooting. I thought there would be a really cool co-op option here, like there is in the Mario Galaxy games. In the Mario Galaxy games, you would simply get the opportunity as the second player to just aim the Wii remote and control where the cursor was for shooting star bits and solving little puzzles and things like that. But it was nice to just have an option to sit down with someone and play. Often the further I get in life, sometimes playing multiplayer games isn't so much about playing the game, it's more about getting together and just having something to kind of do with our hands while we're hanging out. So I would hope that eventually they would do some sort of co-op mode for this, but I don't imagine that's going to be a huge possibility. They'd probably have to rework a lot of things in the game. The other strange lack of customization is in the controls. So you can customize whether you want the HUD to show up, you can customize, how where certain button prompts and aiming reticles appear, but you can't customize the button placement. The A button is jump, which for me as someone who grew up in the Super Nintendo era is incredibly confusing to me. I don't know if this was different in different regions, but every Super Nintendo game that I had played growing up, and seemingly the ones that this game is sort of referencing, works with the B button, not the A button. But that could just be me. But through the first 30 minutes of the game, and I'm probably gonna have this trouble even going forward, it was a little bit confusing to have those switched in. I feel like at this point, I don't know, I'm not a game designer, so I don't know how difficult it is to remap button combinations, but I feel like it's something that you should probably put in your games nowadays. All that being said, OwlBoy is a wonderful, charming game that I can't wait to get back to. It works well in docked, works well handheld, and I love the new middle ground that these indies are forming between the throwaway mobile ports and the bloated AAA games. This is definitely a good grab for your collection if you're looking for something like this. If the visuals grab you, if the story premise grabs you, if the gameplay grabs you, I'd say it's a really interesting game. I think the whole system of, rather than building up Otis's arsenal, he has friends that he sort of carries around. I think it adds a lot of cool little dimensions to how the game works, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. So those are my impressions for OwlBoy. I've played through the first hour or so, and I want to know what you think. So let's have some dialogue in the comments here. Let me know what you think of OwlBoy, if you plan to pick it up or if you plan to skip it, and why. I'd love to have a discussion. Thank you so much for tuning into Nintendo Nightly. I'd love if you subscribed, you could stay up with all of the latest Nintendo news and trends and video game impressions, reviews, all that fun stuff. You can hit the subscribe button that you see on screen, or if you want to check out the last video that I did on Aegis Defenders, you can also click that in the annotated box above. I'll be back in your feed tomorrow with some impressions of the Fire Emblem DLC that is coming out. But until then, have a wonderful night and keep playing your Switch and stuff.